Hello again, Steve here with a little bit of a talk about confirmation bias. And the reason I want to talk about this is I think it's an important tendency that happens to a lot of people, and I have a good example of it happening to me just in the last couple of days. Now, before I begin, I wanted to just make sure we're on the same page here. You're probably completely aware of confirmation bias, but just to bring up speed and those who are maybe not, I just want to read a line off of Wikipedia just to get us up to speed as to what I'm talking about. Okay, confirmation bias, also known as confirmatory bias or my-side bias, is a tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses, while giving disproportionately less consideration to alternative possibilities. So you see, it's like it's a bias or bigotry, right? And what happened to me just a couple of days ago is I was wrapped up in the observation of this whole election fallout or results, you want to call it, with all the protests in the street, and some of them were unruly and disruptive and in some cases violent. And all of a sudden on my Facebook feed shows up this video of a woman taking a crap on what was supposed to be a Trump sign. At least that's what the headline was basically of the video. And I was biased, right? I didn't give consideration because I remember at the time thinking, I watched a little bit of it and thought, I can't really read what the sign says. It doesn't look like a Trump sign, but it was at a distance and it was small and so on. So because of my bias, I didn't give consideration of what it might alternatively be, right? And as it turns out, several people, very politely, pointed out to me that this is false. This was a video that was taken in Mexico City several years ago at some other artistic festival to do with some sort of a protest against another election of some sort, and it wasn't actually an anti-Trump protest. So, you see, I didn't check because I was just so convinced in my own little bubble of the moment, thinking this is what it had to be, right? And this is a tendency I think that a lot of people can have. We probably have our own versions of it. I certainly do, and it's come in spades at me the last couple of days. And I remember a story a guy told me a couple of years ago along this lines. He said, "You know what?" He says, "If your best buddy is in love with an axe murderer, it doesn't matter if she's beautiful and she's seductive and all that, and he's all smitten by her. It doesn't matter how much evidence and so on you give him. He's not going to listen probably because he's got that bias, right?" And I think the same with the mainstream media, right up to the very end, right up to when they didn't even want to call the election because they were just they didn't know if they were living in a dream or something like that because of this echo chamber of confirmation bias and believing their own polls and believing their own discussions and so on, and not looking outside, whereas there was other alternative, otherwise known as the fake media by them, who were polling correctly for a long time, and some of us could actually see that. So I think confirmation bias is a very real thing. It's a tendency that we have, and it's probably a tribal thing that was developed within us, right? We want to be biased towards our side and our view because in times gone by, that was our survival, was to be biased towards our own family, our own way of thinking, our own religion, and so on, to fit in with the crowd, right? But I think now it's important to rise above that and be willing to have friends and associates and so on who can point out to us that, hey, you know what, you're inaccurate here. This isn't correct, and to admit that and learn from it. So I want to thank those once again who pointed out to me that I was completely off base with this post because I didn't fact check, and I admit that my confirmation was biased, and I know that obviously I am susceptible to confirmation bias at times, and I got to be aware of that. Perhaps you're not as susceptible, but I think a lot of people are, and I think it's something to be aware of because we can get off track and we can be irrational when we have confirmation bias. So, Steve here again, great chatting. Hope this is helpful. It's helpful for me for sure to unload this, and maybe there's a learning point for others as well. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.